Welcome to Week 11 of the South Carolina Football Preview Show. We're here at the Village Idiot Pizza and Pub. We're at the Five Points location. They've also got a location in Forest Acres on Forest Drive. We sit here after an SEC win, which we have not done in a while.
Very rare.
Gamecocks are 5-5 overall, finished their SEC season with a 3-5 record after a 23-20 overtime win over Florida. Kind of payback for all of the crazy ways they've lost games this year. Gamecocks down in the final 4 minutes, blocked 2 kicks in the final 3:31, run the ball in overtime, get a victory when Dylan Thompson sprints into the corner of the end zone. Will Muschamp just walked right on out of the swamp and kept right on walking, got fired the next morning. So, but the Gamecocks, as bad as Steve Spurrier felt about knocking his buddy out of a job, feel good for the first time in a while about their football team. Headed into South Alabama, the Jaguars out of the Sun Belt. David, what do you sense from this South Carolina team after what has become a rare SEC win?
All right, Josh, don't get me wrong. This Florida win, it didn't erase the Tennessee and Missouri and Kentucky debacles.
Right.
If it weren't for those games, Josh, they'd have won the SEC East with that win against Florida. They'd be heading to Atlanta in a few weeks, but they didn't. But that being said, Josh, while it will never erase the stink of those 3 games, that Florida game made everybody feel a whole lot better. Now, they're not happy with the 3-5 SEC record or a 5-5 overall record, but the fact is it just makes everybody feel a little bit better about where this season could end up. Just by the numbers, they have a chance to win 3 more games. That would put them at 8-5, which historically, around here, that is a great season. Now, compared to preseason expectations, it's not terrific, but overall, it's a very good season. And, maybe they can go to a decent bowl game, a Jacksonville, a Nashville, a Memphis. I wouldn't mind eating some rendezvous ribs, over the Christmas break, getting ready for a bowl game. But they got to get to a bowl game first, and that's where South Alabama comes in. All I'd say that this should be win number 6, get them bowl eligible for the 10th time in Spurrier's 10-year tenure, and there's only been one of those times where he hasn't gone to a bowl. So we'll see what can happen. The question is, do they overlook this game to get to Clemson? I don't think that with their previous struggles, the Gamecocks are in danger of overlooking anybody. They know that South Alabama's going to try to run the ball. They know that they might see a couple of different guys at quarterback, but I think that this team will be ready. It's senior day. It's military appreciation day. All these guys will be fired up and ready to make the last home game of the year something really special. They do want to get bowl eligible, get that 6th win out of the way, and then they can start looking forward to that kind of big game in a couple of weeks against that Orange team from the upstate. Obviously, the big topic going into the Florida game was what was the future of the coaching staff. Steve Spurrier has said, to you, that he plans to be back next year, but what about the defensive coaches? Well, he's defended them as well. I think that defensive performance really put a lot of confidence into them. They managed to stop the run pretty well. And,
Absolutely.
They didn't even stop the run against Furman, but they stopped it against Florida, which just makes no real sense at all. They didn't. I think they got just a 1 turnover, the fumble that Jordan Diggs got, correct?
Right.
If you don't count the blocks. And this defense is playing probably as confidently as it has this season going into this game. So they'll just have to try to shut it down and, get South Alabama, get this win out of the way, and start preparing for Clemson. As for defensive coaches or any coach's futures, we'll talk about that after the Clemson game. It's kind of obvious there's not going to be anything tangible until after that. So South Carolina's just got to come out, run the football. One stat I found out is Mike Davis is only 125 yards away from 1,000, which would make him only the 2nd guy in program history to notch multiple 1,000-yard seasons. The first guy was some dude named Rogers.
Right.
And, that'd be pretty nice. Dylan Thompson's about 4'11", I think, if my math is correct, 411 yards away from setting the school's all-time best single-season passing yardage record. I doubt he gets set this weekend.
Probably
but
not.
You go ahead and get about 200, maybe 250, 300 of it, and that way maybe you can set it against Clemson next week. You got 2 games left to do it. So, should be a nice little entertaining contest. I don't think South Carolina should struggle much. We'll just have to see how it goes. That's what it looks like from the Gamecock side of the field. Josh, what do you think about the old Jaguars from South Alabama?
Well, this is a team that sets up well for South Carolina's defensive confidence. They've got an athletic quarterback. As a matter of fact, they've got 2 athletic quarterbacks, one of whom is a senior named Brandon Bridge, who I think probably, just based on his physical attributes, will get a chance in the NFL draft.
As a quarterback? Or
yeah,
maybe as a tight end?
As a quarterback. He's a 6'5" kid. He can throw the ball through a wall. The problem is he can't throw it to any of his receivers this year. But I think he'll get a chance. So they've got some talent there, but they just haven't put it all together offensively. I think that this is a team that South Carolina can shut down. Now, defensively, Steve Spurrier really likes what South Alabama puts on tape. Says they fly around. They're first in the Sun Belt in total defense. I don't expect South Carolina, which offensively didn't do much until overtime against the Gators. Now the Gators are a good defense, but I don't think South Carolina's going to score 50. I don't think it's going to be one of those games. But I do think this is a game that's easily winnable. I think the 22-point spread is right about where it needs to be. I'm as interested in what happens before the game as I am the game. We're talking about Senior Day. 22 guys scheduled to walk. I mean, y'all may need to get there at breakfast to see. I mean, they may have to start that ceremony. It's going to be as long as the first quarter, just watching all those guys come out of there. So far, Mike Davis, Drew Owens, the only juniors of note on the list. Wouldn't surprise me, though, if a couple more guys pop up there at the end.
Brandon Wilds, Brandon Shell, Jarrell Adams.
These are the kind of guys. This is not a guarantee that these guys will go pro, although I believe Mike Davis is going to go pro. But this is an indication that they're thinking about it strongly. So I want to see if Brandon Wilds, Brandon Shell, Jarrell Adams show up on that list. Once we get to the game, at that point, about halftime, I think everybody starts thinking about Clemson. It's time to start thinking about the Clemson game. This is, barring a disaster, and we have said, David's right, South Carolina, and Steve Spurrier's right, South Carolina cannot overlook anybody. Barring some sort of wacky disaster, they'll win this game, and the season really does, at that point, come down to Clemson in Death Valley. Deshaun Watson, the intrigue there. Vegas has taken the game off the books because they want to see what's going to go on with Deshaun Watson. Certainly the Carolina people want to see what's going on with Deshaun Watson. Dabo Swinney, probably more than anybody in the world, wants to see what's going on with Deshaun Watson. So, we'll quickly turn our attention to the Tigers as soon as the South Alabama game, maybe kicks off.
Yeah, and 2 pieces of advice for you guys. First of all, come on down and get the lunch special here at Village Idiot. 2 slices and a drink. Great food, great atmosphere. It's the best pizza in the city and the best deal in the city. And second, I think I read somewhere where Clemson's something like a 40-point or 44-point favorite over Georgia State. Wow. With Cole Stout running that offense, bet you 401k on Georgia State to cover that. I think that's a pretty big lock right there. I mean, Cole Stout, bless his heart, he's trying his best, but there's a reason they call that offense 3 and stout when he's in the game. So those are my 2 pieces of advice for you this week. It's time for our Village Idiot mailbag. We appreciate you guys chiming in on social media and that kind of thing. And to Charlie Beans, if you're watching out there, I believe it was who put the bop in the bop to bop to bop, not the boppity bop, but that's neither here nor there. York Delv writes in and says, is there a plan to get backups in this type of game after a certain quarter or score/lead? Well, York, there's always a plan to get guys in. Some of the guys that haven't played much, you want to do that if you get a big lead. Unfortunately, as we all know, plans change and things might not go according to plan. I'm sure that they want to treat this game like the Furman game, get a Connor Mitch, a Perry Orth, David Williams, Shamir Jeffries, some of those guys into the game, let them run around and try to get some stats. And also because it's the last home game, it's a non-conference game, you could dress a lot of these walk-on seniors who maybe haven't got to play a lot and put them in. So yeah, there's a plan to play them, I'm sure, but they'll just have to wait and see how the game turns out before they can actually pull the trigger on those plans and maybe get those guys some reps. Will Floyd says, why doesn't the coaching staff force Dylan Thompson to keep the read option more often? I've seen plenty of times where he could have scored or either got a lot of yards in critical conditions. Will, I can't agree with you more, Watching the Florida game in particular, there were a lot of times where he rolled out and had the open field. I'm watching on TV thinking, run, it's right there, run. Well, Dylan Thompson's not a running quarterback. He's just not. And the coaching staff is not going to force him to do anything. They're not going to go out him and say, look, go out there, go 3 seconds on the drop, go through all your progressions, and if it's not there, run. They're not going to tell him that because they don't know how the protection's going to break down. They don't know what's going to happen downfield with his receivers. I mean, say he does 3 seconds and he runs off, and all of a sudden Nick Jones breaks free of his man. He's running free in the middle of the field. Right. Well, then they'll be saying, why didn't you hang in there and throw it? You can't force somebody to do that. It's just everybody kind of got spoiled by what Connor Shaw could do. And I would really love to go back and chart every time he ran and see how many of those were designed and not. Dylan's not Connor Shaw, and yes, he could do it a lot more often. They want him to do it if he feels like he can get the yards, but it's also hard for him to check out of what he is, which is a very strong arm drop back passer. But now that he's had success on it, perhaps he will do it more often.
Jermaine Simmons says, why can't the Gamecocks take a strong look at putting Pharaoh Cooper at quarterback next year? Well, I think we've seen the answer to that. He's got sort of one pass, and it's the chuck it deep, and he's overthrown a couple of those. Pharaoh answered this question as honestly as he could the first time it was asked about mid-season, and he himself said he is just not a college quarterback. It is such a different animal from high school where you're throwing the ball up. If you've got a strong arm, you can play quarterback in high school and just throw it to a spot. These guys have got to throw it in the small windows. They've got to anticipate. They've got to know a sophisticated passing offense. That is not Pharaoh Cooper. He will do a great job in the Wildcat. He will be an all-SEC, could be an All-America type wide receiver.
Multi-purpose guy.
He is a guy who will hit some passes on double passes and some just chuck it deeps on posts. He'll hit some of those in his career, but he is not a guy who is going to run a college system at quarterback. It's just not going to happen, and you don't want it to happen. Don't take a great wide receiver and turn him into a bad quarterback.
Yeah.
It doesn't help your football team. Peyton Ledwell, what bowl would we go to if we go 7-5? The bowl matchups, there are so many of them. I'm going to say Liberty. If you make me pick,
That'd probably be the best option. Yeah.
If it's a 7-5, going to Memphis. Who you would play? Maybe you play a Texas in that scenario. Mm-hmm. That's a decent matchup. I think any sort of marquee name opponent you could get would be good. You don't want to end up with somebody. No offense to South Alabama, but you don't want to end up with the Sun Belt champion or something. That doesn't blow anybody's skirt up, honestly. So if you could get at this point to Memphis to play Texas, Charlie Strong, I think that's as good as you could hope for at this point, and that's not a bad football game.
And now our final segment on the Village Idiot Pizza preview show. Our selections. Obviously, Josh and I, we picked wrong last week. And
I think I'm on about a 5-game losing
some people have been
streak.
advising us to pick wrong more often. Well, I don't think we can really do that this week. It's South Alabama. Yes, they have a good defense, but South Carolina should be able to handily put this game away. I don't think it will be like a Coastal Carolina game from a couple of years ago, but I do think South Carolina will win comfortably. They'll throw the ball around, get a big lead, hopefully get Mike Davis that 1,000-yard mark, and I see him winning pretty big because they'll score late, 48-14 Gamecocks.
I think it's a win, too. I'm not going to try to build up any drama in that. I'm not sure it's quite that big. I'm going to go 30-10 South Carolina. I say that for a couple of reasons. I think the South Alabama defense is decent. I think that the South Carolina offense doesn't come in with a ton of momentum. And I think that Steve Spurrier will try to get a bunch of these senior guys who don't play much into the game. At the end, it is senior day. You certainly don't want to get anybody on the front line hurt going into the Clemson
Carlton
game.
Hurd definitely deserves some more reps after blocking that punt.
Absolutely, ought to start him. Play him the whole game. So I think for those reasons, South Carolina will be right around what is a 22-point spread. I think Vegas, as usual, will kind of have that pegged. I'm not sure we end up on the front side of that or the back side of that. But I think South Carolina wins pretty easily. A noon kickoff, Fox Sports Network, not an SEC network game. I don't know if Fox Sports is on my TV, but I'm sure you guys can find it. We'll be there at 10 o'clock online to answer all your questions, and we'll even answer Clemson questions. See you then.